Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we're going to take a look at the new moon eclipse in Virgo that is taking place on the 21st of September 2025, and that is happening right in the afternoon in the United States. So we'll take a look at this from a technical perspective, what's actually going on in the sky during this time, describe the alignments, and then we'll look at it from a collective perspective, what we can expect to be going on with people generally, our own experiences of this, and how to make the best of that, what to avoid. And then we'll look at this from a global perspective, what to expect there, and how to best foster a sense of community throughout this period of time. And then we'll go ahead and take it through sign by sign. So without a doubt, the most significant alignment within the context of this eclipse is going to be the fact that it is opposite to Saturn in Pisces, which has just retrograded back into Pisces after having gone during the summer into Aries. So when we're dealing with a new moon, especially a new moon eclipse, there is something that's trying to be birthed out of that moment. There's something that's trying to kick off, that's trying to get started. It is the beginning of the lunar cycle. But with an opposition from Saturn, there's something of a blockage there. And what's interesting is that Saturn, which is in the late degrees of Pisces, it is still conjoined to Neptune, which is on the Aries side of that sign boundary, but it is also going backward into Pisces throughout the winter here. So we are still dealing with that conjunction, even though it's acting a little bit less like a conjunction when they're on opposite sides of that sign barrier. So we're going to look at it from that perspective. But we also have a couple other alignments here that are quite significant. For one thing, this is actually taking place all within the context of a kite aspect pattern. So this new moon is also trying to Uranus, which is in the early degrees of Gemini, and it's also trying to Pluto, which is in the early degrees of Aquarius. So that is quite significant. That is tying this new start that is trying to get blocked, but I think it's actually going to become protracted. Again, we're going to get into the whole further description of all of this, but there's something that's very much aligned with the times and with what the outer planets are trying to bring into the culture, bring into the moment, bring into the social reality that we're dealing with in the years going forward. So there's without a doubt a very genuine new seed here that we're running with. But again, Saturn is playing a bit of a spoiler role within this, and it's bringing up something of the past that's getting in the way here. Additionally, the ruler of this new moon eclipse, because it's taking place in Virgo, both the domicile ruler and the exaltation ruler of this is going to be Mercury. And Mercury is a bit ahead of this new moon eclipse. It's actually getting ahead of most everything in the wheel. So it's very likely to feel like there is something that's getting ahead of us, like we're trying to catch up to something, like we're trying to push something forward, and yet there's something that's still kind of holding us back here. Additionally, there's a ton of earth and air in this chart. So in air signs, we have Mercury and then Mars wrapping up its time in Libra. We also then have Uranus and Pluto in the air signs, and then we have the Sun, Moon, and Venus in Virgo. So there is something rather calculating or exacting, something trying to be quite straightforward here, and yet there's still a little bit of the muddy waters that we're going to be talking about here, and is actually going to be coming up in a pretty significant way throughout the autumn in a way where we're learning to kind of work with that old energy. So again, we'll talk about that in a shortly forthcoming video here. Additionally, very significant, this is the only set of eclipses, the lunar eclipse in Pisces I just spoke about, and then the solar eclipse in Virgo. This is the only Pisces-Virgo match that we're getting the entire time that the North Node is in Pisces and the South Node is in Virgo, in part because we're not getting any solar eclipses in Pisces throughout this whole period of time, which is very strange. Though I do feel like there's more about understanding and assimilating what that Pisces energy has meant for us in recent years, with Neptune having gone through that sign since 2011, and then we had Saturn going through that sign since March of 2023. It's almost like we're having to assimilate that. It's since we're only getting lunar eclipses there, there's a culmination in that place. It's not so much that we're needing to bring that on. We're actually kind of needing to counterbalance that energy with Virgo here. So, with all of that said, I have a lot of notes here. We're going to look at this from a collective level first, then we will step into global energies before we get into the sign by sign. So, one thing I would recommend with this solar eclipse in Virgo is to account for old blockages that are interfering with new plans or actions. The reason for that is the way that it's aligned with Saturn causing a blockage to the otherwise flowing aspects with Uranus and Pluto, which are trying to bring in this new age of air. But there's something that's still lingering from that old Piscean age that we're dealing with. And it's funny with this new moon eclipse. I've been feeling like as the planets move from water and earth signs into the air and fire signs, which are much more active, it's almost like we're getting out of having to wade through the mud. It's almost like now with this eclipse, with the placement of Saturn here, and then with Neptune and Uranus about to go back into, again, those water and earth signs, that there's a bit more of a mud patch that we're needing to wade through before we really get released into a very new zeitgeist, very new considerations, concerns, a new paradigm that we're working with, but that we're also constructing and creating together. So if we can account for those old blockages, if we can try not to get too frustrated with them around this period of time, they are coming up so that we can process that old Piscean energy that we've been dealing with about belief systems, about matters of unity, what that means to us, stories and narratives, what those old stories mean to us, processing that, taking the valuable nuggets out of that, and then releasing the rest. And how also are those old stories, those old paradigms, how might they get in the way of those new plans, new actions that we're trying to take in the coming years? Again, for us all personally on a collective level. So there's just kind of too much overthinking based on those old paradigms. Taking time, therefore, to process that, taking time throughout this entire autumn. I'm going to reiterate over and over again in forthcoming videos, but take care of body, spirit with these eclipses that are taking place in Pisces and Virgo. I think this liminal state that we're in as all the outer planets are switching signs, it would be really wonderful if we can just kind of try during this winter to process, to take care of ourselves, to make sure our energy is right for a lot of the activity and exertion and pushing forward and future planning that we're going to be getting into in the coming years here, starting around next spring, summer period of time. So additionally, I'm thinking that there's going to be a lack of clarity around expectations or how specifically to take action. And again, to me, that's a sign here of this isn't really the moment to take action. This is the moment to process what it is that we're wanting to take action on, how it is that we're wanting things to be different than they have been in recent years. I'm sure all of us can write a very long list about that. A lot of our lists would probably say very similar things as well. So when it comes to those questions about how to take action and any sort of lack of clarity along those lines, focusing in on that, trying to figure out that's where that blockage is. So that's what we need to be accounting for in terms of those old blockages. Additionally, given the energies that we're dealing with here, this might feel kind of hectic or directionless. And so one of the things that I would really recommend is just getting done what you can. Focus on the short term right now in terms of what it is that you're actually doing. So take care of the tasks that you can. Planning far ahead and trying to start up on something that's far ahead is likely to be very frustrating. And again, I think part of that is because if we really try to initiate a lot under this Pisces, Virgo energy that we're dealing with here, before we start to get the Aquarius and Leo eclipses coming in, which the first of those is going to be taking place in February. We're going to be getting a new moon eclipse in Aquarius. Remember how I mentioned we're not getting any new moon eclipses in Pisces. We got one in Aries because while the North Node was in Pisces, the new moon that was closest to that North Node was actually taking place in Aries. The same thing is happening in this case, but it's going to be in Aquarius. That should be a really wonderful kicking off point. Then the next eclipse season, we're getting a solar eclipse in Leo. So that's really starting to kick this off. That's why I'm saying this winter here, I wouldn't say don't do anything, or if things are working, that's perfectly wonderful, but try not to be hard on yourself like an opposition to Saturn could be around things that just feel a little bit stuck. So rather than spinning those wheels, or rather than, kind of hitting your head against that wall repeatedly, if you can be really patient with yourself, with others throughout this period of time about what's working, what's not working, and understand that we're starting to dip back into those old energies that have had us stuck for a little while. So it's not so much us on a personal individual level that's getting stuck or that's causing any sort of stuckness. This is really about processing. So some of the positive things with this, the positive signs, how to make the best of it, is there is an opportunity to turn a new leaf and to reject convention. That's what we're looking at when we're looking at those old blockages, the conventional ways of doing things, the ways that we've stuck with for quite some time might be less than satisfactory, but we think, well, this is how things are done, so this is how I'm going to do it. Because of those alignments, the opposition between that new moon and that Saturn, it's not just that Saturn's opposing that new moon eclipse. That new moon eclipse is opposing that Saturn in Pisces. So there is that active rejection from the luminaries to that old Saturn paradigm around what's conventional, what is it that we're working with, what are the stories that we're running with. And this could even be the thoughts that we have around how to bring attention to certain things. So one of the things I'm thinking of is like social media. We may have these conceptions around, oh, well, you need to start a Twitter for a thing and a Facebook for it and a TikTok for it. Those things may actually not be as significant in the years to come. So that might even be a little bit of that blockage there. Those tools are actually becoming quite conventional, and there may be a whole new series of things that maybe feels a bit more fitting, or at least it feels like it fits the zeitgeist a little bit better, that are starting to get implemented in the years to come. And I personally find that life tends to work out that way when I am hitting my head against the wall on something and I'm trying to make it work, and it's not slotting into place. Usually there's some missing information it's something that's forthcoming. It's another tool in that toolbox that is going to be a change maker, but it's not quite in my awareness yet. So I would expect that's something of the opposition that I'm really feeling with the solar eclipse, and then the Saturn in Pisces. And what's interesting too is that with Virgo, we can definitely get material tools and communicative tools, organizational things. There is that technical organizational factor to Virgo. So there may actually be something kicking off here, maybe a different kind of a platform or a different kind of connecting. I personally feel like we are getting a little bit more in coming years into one, different platforms, yes, but also a renewal of community, a renewal of local ties. So I think that Virgo new moon eclipse may really be speaking to kicking some of those things off, kicking off new ways of organizing with each other. Because this new moon eclipse is absolutely very cerebral and very connective in nature with all of the air alignments that we have taking place with this. That Mercury, which is in Libra here, that is very connective. Mercury itself is all about exchange. It's all about making sense of things, bringing things together, bridging gaps, and building up those connections. But in Libra, it is highly, highly social. It's also quite focused on harmony. So how do we create those harmonious social connections that we've been craving pretty much since COVID, when a lot of those things came apart? That I think is going to be really kick-started by this new moon eclipse, is basically what I'm getting at there. And I do think it'll be both online and offline. So, a couple things when it comes to what to avoid for best results here. Avoiding reality sinking in is something to avoid. I don't know how to like really accept reality sinking in, I guess would be the way to say that. So that's another part of that opposition that can actually be quite helpful. Again, with that opposition to Saturn, there's this big don't go this way, don't do this thing. And we might be holding on nostalgically to something that there's almost this very clear warning about this isn't going forward with us into the years to come. So try not to kick off in this place. There's something else. We're getting redirected here. And that reality is really sinking in with this last go of Saturn and Neptune going into Pisces, reevaluating all of those paradigms, all of those narratives and stories about ourselves, our community, our society, the world that we live in, and how all of this is working together. That's going to be completely different in the years to come. So, this period of time going back is just looking at that, take account of it. What did we believe? That's falling away. And hence, that reality is sinking in with that Saturn Neptune conjunction there. Additionally, I'm going to get into there's a square between Mars and Pluto, which is also taking place right around this eclipse, is definitely getting heightened by that eclipse and is adding a bit of a nasty edge to things here. So I would really try your best to avoid anger, frustration, negativity, melancholy, distraction. There's this willingness to fight with this, with the opposition to Saturn and then the square between Mars and Pluto there. Getting sucked into a negative news cycle or getting sucked into something that is meant to make you feel hopeless, or it's meant to make you feel like, yes, we're stuck in these old energies and it's never going to change, or getting us stuck into this cycle of distraction that we've been in for years here. I would really try to avoid as much as you can all of those kinds of energies that are coming in here. So with all of that said, let's talk about this on a global scale. So, what we can expect to see in the global news, in the world. So, again, matters of reality sinking in. That's going to be a factor for everyone, and therefore it's going to be something that we're seeing within the news cycle, is those old stories, those old paradigms breaking down. Now, that can have material impacts as well. So, there may be alliances or institutions that are losing ground. This need to recognize that we're very much in a new era. The old way of doing things, the old assumptions, the old expectations, the old privileges, the old stratification, that this isn't really working anymore. The old way of enforcing a specific type of order, that is falling away. And the stories that supported all of that are really falling away. Reality is sinking in about how we may have bought into those things. And hopefully, part of that reality that's sinking in is an understanding of how to not fall into some of these narrative traps going forward as well. So, in the world, I would absolutely expect anger, conflict, the start potentially of violence with an opposition to Saturn with this new moon eclipse, but also with that square between Mars and Pluto, the new moon eclipse kicking off that energy, the start of a new kind of violence or power struggles. One thing that's been sticking with me about really this kind of broader period of time is that there are these sides or lines drawn. And I would say, I feel like when I was looking at the beginning of the year, or when I was looking at 2025 at the beginning of the year, it looked to me like it was kind of seasonal. So going into Libra and possibly even Scorpio season, these taking sides, feeling the need to represent something other than oneself. And I felt like there was a lot of folly in that. So that is something that I would recommend a bit of hesitancy on a personal level. But again, we're likely to see that quite a bit in the world. This is rough for leaders, for authority, for governments, for institutions. There could possibly be a fall of any one of those things. So we may see a leader fall away. We may see, this is typical of eclipse season. We may see some authority really start to face calls for accountability, calls to step down with the opposition with Saturn there. There could be power plays or kind of like, what is it? Palace intrigue, something along those lines, power struggles behind the scenes, trying to take people down, manipulation. And of course, we could see a conflict start or escalate throughout this period of time, which I hate to say it, but it is very much in that astrology. There could also be power struggles between or within institutions that wind up sullying or muddying them as well. Another factor here is that this feels to me very protracted, very slow, very long term. I think that we're going to be seeing the effects of this eclipse. Usually we can see it for 3 to 6 months, but I think that this one is really going to kick something off that may be even more protracted than that. So, for instance, the Aries Libra eclipses kick off when the current state of the conflict of Israel against Gaza, when that kicked off. This looks to me quite similar in that there may be something that's very protracted that goes beyond this eclipse season that's kicked off here. So there may be something that looks like a blip or looks like a short-term concern or just a distraction or something like this. It winds up becoming something that's quite long-term that winds up sticking with us for a while. It also looks to me like a stalemate with Venus and Mars debilitated, with Jupiter unaspected within this wheel. That's part of that trying not to jump to conclusions and take sides and join a fight that's just going to turn into a stalemate. I think that there are some conflicts here or some sides drawn, things like that, that are kind of pointless and that don't ultimately wind up being useful for us going forward. And so it's probably just a waste of energy to get wrapped up in a lot of those conflicts that are kicked off around this period of time. There's also with this eclipse a really intense rigidity and coldness that's in this chart. So this could be extremely calculating, and yet this is definitely not what I would want to be involved with karmically on a personal level. Again, try not to jump to conclusions, try not to jump into any old fight. I would really give things some time to cook here before digging your heels in. And the reason for that is with the North Node in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer, yeah, that Jupiter is getting overlooked right now, but it's still there and it is ruling that North Node. So getting involved in these petty squabbles, petty fights, drawing lines, dividing people, dividing things, I would not want to carry that karma with me forward out of this. And I think it's going to be a major temptation for some people. So I think we will see that in the world, though. Also, I would expect blockage of information or revelation, or on the flip side of that, and or I should say, matters of collection of information like surveillance. So those kinds of issues coming up, releases, leaks, revelations, maybe classified information or something like this, and then matters of surveillance becoming significant around this period of time, again, when it comes to the news cycle. So when it comes to blockage of information or revelation, I saw something along those lines where there was another limited hangout that took place around the Epstein issue, where there was a quote unquote release of information, but it was all the same information yet again. So things along those lines. It might not just be the Epstein thing, but that did take place, another limited hangout during this eclipse season. So additionally, plans or organization could get blocked. So you're trying to bring things together, you're trying to sort things out, you're trying to come up with a plan going forward, and there just keeps being that stalemate, that blockage, that running into a wall with that where it just can't move forward here. Likely to see that also on governmental or institutional or even international levels as well. We could also see the return of the tariff issue as that wound up kicking off last eclipse season with the last new moon eclipse was close to Saturn in Pisces during last Pisces season. Additionally, bad numbers. This is something that I've been saying out of the Aries ingress and the solar return of the United States this year is bad numbers. And I wasn't expecting that to be quite as literal as let's fire the person who is accounting for labor is doing the jobs numbers. But again, I wouldn't be surprised to see more bad numbers, things along those lines coming through as well. So, how to best foster community and understanding with this transit? Again, avoid jumping to conclusions. So, try not to rely on initial reports about major news stories. Like I said, information's getting blocked, revelations are getting blocked. And one of the ways that that is done is through what we call limited hangouts. And so, that refers to when a little bit of information, which is favorable to the cause of whoever is putting that information out, which may even have some admissions in it, that is released in order to distract from a bigger, broader issue. So it's not a complete story, and it's actually there to obfuscate. There's a kind of fake leak to obfuscate the issue. So I would not be surprised if there's some of that coming in here with the opposition between Saturn and Pisces and then the new moon eclipse in Virgo, which is very much about let's release information, let's clean this all up. The fact that that is in an opposition to Saturn there, the fact that Mercury is still just the ruler of this eclipse is still just pushing off of the opposition with Neptune. The information that we're getting during this eclipse season is not complete, and that may be on multiple sides. That is something that we need to keep in mind, is that it might not just be the sides that we disagree with, which are releasing partial information. So there can also be issues thinking clearly with this. I hate to say because this is in the in-between period, between Mercury retrogrades, but it may actually kind of feel like that. Additionally, then matters are unfolding really slowly. So, like I said, don't expect for something to just be a blip or just be a distraction. There's something broader that is unfolding here, but that may also frustrate us on the pacing of things. Part of the picture here is definitely being obscured, possibly from multiple sides. We already went into that. Another thing is that people, generally speaking, are likely to be feeling very liminal right now between something that has passed and is passing out of the era, basically, but not yet fully stepped into the next era. This eclipse is really highlighting the fact that we have three retrogrades, which are going into the old signs before next year we finally get those Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune permanently in their new signs before we get past that real conjunction of Saturn and Neptune that's going to be taking place in February. We're in this real liminal space, and so we could feel both liminal and yet aimless and unsure about what moves to make. This is very frustrating, so people could be very irritable as they're unclear on productivity, how to be productive or how to motivate themselves because they're not quite sure what it is that they're aiming at. So try to be really patient with yourself if you're feeling that way and with others, as they are very likely to be feeling that way during this period of time. And that on the community level, so the collective level is the people that we're dealing with in our day to day, but also on a broader level, try to give things some time to cook, to unfold. We're not going to get all of the information. We're not going to get all of the clarity all at once here. This is very much a work in progress. But I think that this new moon eclipse, opposite to that Saturn, will ultimately wind up bringing us a lot of clarity. It's just that it's going to be as we're leading into the next eclipse season, I think, with that new moon eclipse in Aquarius, which is then followed by another lunar eclipse in Virgo. So yeah, other than that, just looking at this wheel here, we've got a couple interesting squares here. That square between Mars and Pluto, I kind of mentioned it, but that is nasty. And they're both right now, during that eclipse, they're both in air signs. So it could be really manipulative, nasty words. There could be someone really trying to throw a wrench into social connections. If people seem like they're getting on the same page and that's not in the best interests of some underhanded actors that we see globally at times, especially around this time, that could really muddy up the waters. And I'm almost wondering if that is something that we could see quite clearly around this period of time too. What's interesting is we have a sextile that is waning, but it's still there between Venus, which has just gone into Virgo, and that Mars, which is in Libra. Those two are really highlighting the sun and the moon, which are part of the eclipse, and then the ruler of the eclipse is Mercury. So we've got that Virgo Libra corridor really getting highlighted, and that is that kind of coming together. That's people kind of getting along, and that sextile between Venus and Mars. So again, it looks to me like someone is trying to, and it's probably global actors, it's probably media, these bigger institutions and things like that, trying to keep things the same by Uranus in Gemini squaring that Venus side of it, and then Pluto in Aquarius squaring that Mars side of it. It's almost like there's a bridge that's being built between people more on an everyday level that's getting recognized and seen as potentially a threat to the old institutional order, which is falling away. So I would not be surprised to see, again, some nasty words, that square on the other side, whereas we have the square between Mars in Libra, Pluto in Aquarius, both air signs, those are communicative and social. On the other side, what we have is Uranus in Gemini, which is as communicative as they get. And then we have that Venus is in Virgo, again, Mercury ruled. There's something very much here about words that are quite offensive, that are potentially quite hateful. There may be something specifically about hate speech that's coming up around this period of time, or defamation, libel, things like this, trying to undercut certain people or certain parties, certain groups of people, trying to stir that up, trying to stir the pot. It really is fascinating that we have specifically Jupiter's not getting aspected. We've got the inner planets, Mars inward. We have all of them on one side, and they're all getting hard aspects from the outer planets, which again is the more kind of global institutional kinds of actors that we tend to deal with. So again, it looks to me like on a local level or on a communal level, we are kind of getting on the same page. We're recognizing probably something along the lines of what I said earlier on about how if we were to create lists of the old blockages, the old BS that seems to get in our way, that probably a lot of our lists would look very much similar. That's kind of what it's looking like on that side to me. And yet there are definitely some interests in the world that would love for us to not recognize that probably a lot of our lists of frustrations would look very much the same. So there's something a bit untoward here. I do hate to say, but I can't sugarcoat it. We're getting into an interesting season that I'm going to be talking about here shortly, where we're getting a ton of water grand trines, and things actually start to become pretty functional as that Jupiter, which you can see at 21 degrees of Cancer, is moving forward toward a trine with that backward moving Saturn, which is at 28 degrees of Pisces right now. We are really on the cusp of a long-term trine between those two. And that is wonderful because some of the frustration of the past year and a half or so has been the fact that we had a square between Jupiter and Saturn, getting especially our material institutions like the Federal Reserve, like with the tariffs and everything, our economies, getting them really twisted up, getting major blockages, major frustrations in the mix there, where even then companies are like, we don't really know what moves to make right now because we don't know where we're going to stand. We're getting that trine in the water signs for pretty much the entire autumn this year. And then those two, Jupiter and Saturn, will start to move into the air sign or the fire signs next year. And that trine is actually going to go on and off, all the way out into 2027. So this is quite fortunate. I really feel like we're in this last major push through some old nonsense that's no longer serving humanity, and that we're needing to process that right now. But starting next year, we really get to kick off this new stuff. So process the old, start to try to embrace the new, try to let go of assumptions, try to take on a beginner's mind here, because we're dealing with a situation that none of us have dealt with before. So if anyone is telling you that they're an expert on how things are going, that's going to be some BS. You know, none of us have lived through an era like the one that we're stepping into. So yeah, with all of that said, I think that is pretty much what I'm getting from this eclipse. So I'm going to go into the sign by sign, but before I do want to thank you all for spending this time with me. I really hope that this video was helpful. If it was, please do consider giving it a thumbs up. That helps the video to spread around, which helps the channel quite a bit. And if you enjoy content like this, do consider sticking around by subscribing. Again, a quick little note that I do have live readings open again. If that's something that you are interested in, there's information in the description box below. And thank you so much to the members of the channel: Angel Niblock, Michelle Howell, JJ, Deborah Keel-Leavitt, Patrick McKenney, Jody, Anne Marie, C. Rezer, Peace Out, Maria Sarah Hyro, Rachel Windholtz, Lisa S., Aya, The Z-Man 1291, Lynn Newman, Long T. Standing, The Nelson Cat Maya, Connie DiMartino, Dolly Geezy, Mango JT, B. Love, Grace, Psyche Lloyd, Noah, Aquarian Antiquarian, Susan Martin, Jonathan Mason, Chad Wiseman, Ezekiel David LaRosa, Adrienne K., Astrology Party, SP, Karen, Teresa Jones, Seda Tup Huoglu. I think that's right. I'm hoping that's right. I'm going to double check that here shortly. Cherry Leas and Horse Dog Notebook. Thank you all so much. Much love to you all. And there's information in the description box below as well if you are interested in membership perks. And other than all of that, thank you all so much again. And let's get into the sign by sign. All right, so for Aries, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your 6th house. So this is speaking to restructuring your daily routines, focusing on your work habits, your productivity, how it is that you get things done. This is also the activity that you prioritize day to day. So there's an opportunity here for a new start along all of these lines. Any habits that you're wanting to break, any habits that you're wanting to start, this can be really helpful to those ends. So I would, if there's been a habit that's been difficult to break or something along these lines, I would give it another go during this period of time. We just had another new moon in Virgo just before this one in August. And so we're getting a lot of really fresh energy in this place, and you might be able to really kick something off in terms of either starting or breaking any sort of habits that you may have. Also, when it comes to your working life, there can be some really wonderful new opportunities that you've been coming into over the past month or coming up here quite shortly, or some major significant shifts and changes within your job, either the position or the work that you're doing, the responsibilities that you're taking care of, the organization of that, possibly even the technology that's involved. Basically, those habits, those routines looking quite a bit differently within your working life as well throughout this period of time. Also, really wonderful period of time to focus on health and wellness. This can be mental, emotional, spiritual as well. But in the 6th house, it tends to go kind of straightforward in terms of physical health and wellness. So again, also if there's any sort of regimens or something that you're wanting to start to kick off, this would be a really great time to try and do that as well, as routines are more likely to stick that are started under this kind of an influence here. And then, yeah, of course, any sort of unhealthy habits that you found yourself in, especially if there's anything to do with being overly of service to other people. So putting yourself last, really focusing on what other people are wanting from you or needing from you more so than what it is that you're actually wanting to do. Any habits like that, really good time to look at those, try to address those. There can absolutely be something coming up during this period of time around work-life balance and kind of beyond work life, but what are your values? How does your spiritual sense of purpose interact with your routines and your working life? Do you feel like the work that you do, that which you pour your energy into, is aligned with your morals, your spiritual vision? You feel like it's healthy for you on that emotional, psychological level as well. The reason I bring this up is that we did just have that lunar eclipse also take place in your 12th house, which I spoke about recently. And that can be tying some of those themes together. So, how is it that your productivity winds up impacting your sense of self-worth or your sense of purpose, your sense of meaning, your sense of even perspective or meaning making within your life, your morals, your ethics, things like this. So really evaluating how it is that your day-to-day life winds up impacting you on that deeper level. And what is the role of productivity in your life? Is it in a healthy balance with also being able to have some sense of solitude, have some sense of being able to kind of fill your own cup, so to speak? How is that really fitting into the equation for you? So yeah, these are the things I would definitely focus on throughout this period of time for good results, but I would also expect for there to be some shifts and changes that are just kind of presenting themselves to you throughout this period of time in this sixth house area of your life as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Aries. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Taurus, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your fifth house. And this fifth house has a lot to do with your sense of creative expression, passion projects, hobbies, interests. Romantic interests can also show up here, as well as your connection with children and your own childhood, your own childlike nature. So there's a new start in this area, which could point to a new passion project, a new creative pursuit, a new hobby, a new interest, something that's kicking off that is of some kind of significance to you. And this may be involved with communication or writing or something along those lines as well with Virgo in this place. But it really could be anything along those lines that you really enjoy and love to do. Also, when it comes to romantic relationships, if you are dating, even if you're not dating, if you're single, there could be a new interest along those lines that is quite surprising. This is our first Virgo new moon eclipse, and so this is kicking off a season for you that's going to take about a year, in which there can be some new starts romantically throughout this coming year. This can also point to fertility, so literal or metaphorical. This can definitely point to pregnancy or a birth. This could be a child that is born that's relevant to you, so a niece or a nephew, a friend's child, a child that you'll know that will be a significant part of your life, or just thinking a lot about fertility and perhaps having your biological clock start to tick with these eclipses in your fifth house. Maybe you're wanting grandchildren. Maybe you're thinking about mentoring or something along those lines. But this can also speak to fertility in terms of just magnetizing positive things to you, magnetizing a sense of all the different forms of abundance that can take place in our life, whether that be around joy or finances or friendship or passion or interests, things that really interest you, an abundance of inspiration or personal growth, pride in a good way, hopefully. This is a really wonderful house, the fifth house. It tends to go over quite well. There aren't really a lot of downsides with it. So it is really kicking off something that's beautiful and new for you. And that can also be, again, especially with this Mercury ruled fifth house that you have natally, this can really speak to a major urge to express yourself really authentically, verbally, and to enjoy having fun with words. You may even encounter someone who inspires you along those lines, who just has a way with just knowing the exact right word to use in the exact right place. And this could even inspire you to be creatively expressive yourself. So, be this an open mic kind of a situation or writing, anything like that. Just being more open or more expressive with people, speaking up more, talking to more random people, and just enjoying yourself, enjoying that exchange. Virgo is also a learning sign. So that may be something that you really love. And this could be something that's sparking off in terms of an interest in a subject or a passion project or creative pursuit that is somewhat academic or cerebral in nature as well, or a craft or a skill that you're learning. Additionally, with this speaking to childhood, these eclipses that are taking place in this house, we had a lunar eclipse in March in this house of yours. Now we're getting this solar eclipse. This can be kicking off some healing of childhood wounds. Now, I wouldn't expect for this to be the heaviest kind of thing. So, like I said here, through joy, art, or performance, but sometimes it can be a bit heavy when we're recognizing, wait a second, that was a little bit sideways. I didn't quite think about the fact that that was kind of problematic for me. And so kind of looking at your own childhood through a lens of analysis, that can be a bit frustrating to do in the beginning. But I would say if that's something that winds up coming up, that has come up this year, or that does wind up coming up, that writing about that, or again, looking at that from a perspective of joy or art or performance, reparenting yourself could be a major thing with this as well. Healing yourself through working with your inner child and indulging that inner child a little bit more in order to reinforce your own sense of self-worth and so forth. And therefore, then sparking off, if you were working on inner child stuff in order to work on self-worth, that can also really give you the permission to express yourself really authentically and playfully in a way that maybe you haven't before. But yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Taurus. This is a really wonderful place to have eclipses. So I hope that this treats you super well. And thank you so much for being here with me. All right, so for Gemini, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your fourth house of home, family, roots. So this could certainly speak to matters of moving, of renovating your home, of redefining your home in some way. So major changes when it comes to your physical home. You could absolutely be purging a home with Virgo there. So major cleaning, probably getting rid of a lot of things as well. This could even speak to a major detoxification of your home. So there could be some energetic purging as well. This is also the place of family, so this can speak to a major shift or change with regard to your relationship with your family members. This could be people moving in or out as well of your home. Or if you have younger children, this school year might be of a great deal of significance for you in terms of your relationship with them and the evolution of that relationship. This is really wonderful for healing from any sort of ancestral or childhood patterns, any family patterns that have continued for some time. This can point those out so that you can begin to address them. And that is one thing that I would really suggest with this is not just detoxifying your home, but also detoxifying those roots or those patterns. So looking back on any patterns that maybe you've carried forward that you'd rather do without, doing your best to be aware of and begin to purge those matters. This can also really speak to desiring a more structured or peaceful domestic life. Again, that kind of detoxifying the environment with Virgo here. So creating almost a sanctuary of your home. There really is this thing with the South Node in Virgo, with this new moon, a really wonderful opportunity to clear the air, to cleanse your space, to create greater structure, greater organization, to create a space in which you can feel very comfortable and also much more grounded. And you may also wind up feeling that need for privacy and grounding throughout this period of time too. So wanting to be at home, wanting to focus on clearing out those energies, wanting to focus on working on your home as well, or on your family relationships. This could also speak to looking back over memories or something like this, especially if you're purging or you're doing a big spring cleaning. I know it's not spring, but I refer to it that way regardless of what season it is. You may wind up uncovering some memories, and this could have you look back at some connections and reevaluate what those patterns are that run through your family and so on. And there is also a really wonderful opportunity under this influence to start fresh with family. So to begin anew, to detoxify and purge those relationships with intention, and then decide to approach those connections in a different energy. Maybe releasing grievances or past hurt or things like this, trying to interrupt, trying to change that pattern for the better. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Cancer, we have the new moon in Virgo taking place in your third house of communication, connection, community, extended family, the people, places, things around you. This is also where technology and your commute shows up in the chart. So this could speak to some pretty significant writing, teaching, or speaking projects, or kicking off a writing routine basically of yours. So maybe starting journaling or something along these lines. But this is connecting you in ways like that, where there's that exchange of information or ideas. So this could be a start along those lines, or something becoming a lot more significant, stepping into a new role when it comes to these things. Some significant events also around learning, practical, valuable, possibly skills or subjects, information that is significant to you, that's really valuable to you. You may even, like, this could even speak to running across a book or a video or something on the radio or whatever that has a profound impact on you throughout your life. I don't know if you've had that experience. I assume that pretty much everyone has at some point or another, where you hear something and you connect with it so much and you never thought about it that way, and it just changes the way that you look at life fundamentally. So I also would really not be surprised if there are experiences like that coming up in the coming weeks, possibly even a little bit longer, but certainly within the coming few weeks. I would definitely chalk that up to this new moon eclipse in your third house, especially if it's very practical or helps you with productivity, basically, or looking at your priorities and being able to evaluate them in a way that feels more aligned. Now, this can, I know that I said in the general that this could feel like something of a Mercury retrograde. That's mostly because of the way that the sun and the moon and Saturn are aligned, and then the way that Mercury and Neptune are aligned during this period of time. There's also other stuff going on, like in this moment, but this is kicking something off that continues beyond that opposition. So your language, the way that you speak about things, it could be more exacting. It could even sound more critical to some people. So that is something to maybe consider. If there's a bit more, if you're priding yourself on, I'm speaking straightforwardly, consider whether there's a bit of a bite to that, perhaps, because of the fact that it is opposite to that Saturn. But there could even be this sense of connecting with language in a new, fresh way, where you feel like you're able to connect with it, perhaps even more emotionally, but just more genuinely. And so not really needing to mince your words is something that can absolutely come out of this. If I'm remembering correctly, and I'm pretty sure that I am, I want to say that this is our only Virgo solar eclipse, actually, in this whole series. And so, because I know that next season, the solar eclipse that we're getting next year, in close to the Virgo season, is actually falling into Leo. So this is something that would be really wonderful to take advantage of if you have been wanting to make any changes to your communication, if you have been feeling like you mince words, if you've been feeling like you don't communicate quite as directly as you could. Take it from a Pisces Mercury. That is not something that we do. We're not direct with our language. But this could give you a really wonderful opportunity to focus more on that, to set your intention on that. That would be a great intention to set with this new moon eclipse here. Also, when it comes to those extended family, sibling, or community relationships, your role within your community, how it is that you connect with your community, that can also be shifting fundamentally here. So this could even be along the lines of like setting a regular date with friends to go out and go somewhere and hang out again, like a lot of people don't do quite as much as they used to, and connecting with your community in that way. This could be getting involved in some group that, is doing something within your community. This could be taking classes and connecting with people that way. It could be getting involved in a community organization that's specifically about improvements to the community. It's a place where you connect, and this is kicking that off around this new moon eclipse here. Heck, you might even be wanting to purge some connections that you do have around you. And I'm not sure exactly how you would do that with this new moon eclipse, but I think that kind of a thing, if there's a toxic connection that you have, this would definitely be something that would give you an urge to do that. So this could even speak to a shift. That's one thing that eclipses can tend to do as well, is like stepping out of a specific type of group and into another. Or if you have a friend that, okay, well, this is a close friend of mine, this is the friend that I tend to go out on coffee dates with or whatever, maybe you want to make yourself kind of busy so that you can step away from that and step into maybe a different kind of a group. Also, your connections with technology could also be shifting. So when it comes to those social connections and community connections, that could even be folding into matters of social media or online communities, things like this. And your relationship with those may be changing. So maybe you're going a little bit more offline. Maybe you're going a little bit more online, or you're discovering a really wonderful group or community that you feel fits really well. That's ultimately what's significant here is, does it feel pure? Does it feel organic when we're dealing with Virgo? Your daily commute may also be changing. Your relationship with the physicality of your community. So a big part of that for a lot of us is commute. This could be going to a different grocery store. This could be there's construction in a certain area, so you're avoiding taking that route, which is therefore causing you to check out different places or different different options of things to do in different areas, locality, basically. So therefore connecting with your community differently, also on a physical level. But yeah, I think that's mostly what I have for you, Cancer. So I hope that this eclipse treats you super well, and thank you so much for being here. All right, so for Leo, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your second house of income, finances, your own resources, your sense of value and values, as well as security and stability. So this can definitely speak to new forms of income or new budgeting habits. So for instance, there could be a penny saved is a penny earned kind of an indication here. But hopefully it's speaking to some kind of a new source of income. But it can absolutely speak to your relationship with your resources and that shifting and changing. So that can definitely speak to matters of budgeting or investments or property, shifting property, moving money around, making your money work for you better. And so, for instance, if you have a goal, a financial goal, maybe you're wanting to make some significant purchase at some point, or you're wanting to put yourself in a really good position. This is really speaking to that clear sense of self-worth and what you value, and focusing on that and setting your intention on creating that for yourself. That sense of, yes, I deserve for this to happen. And so if that means making little tweaks along the road to my budgeting habits or to my relationship with my income, etc., then that's really worth it. And that's what I'm going to do from here on out, basically. Now, there can be with Virgo a purging energy to this. So This can speak to releasing material clutter, outdated possessions, things that don't feel like they're improving your quality of life, releasing those things, possibly donating them, or if that is too much effort, just getting rid of things is a lot better than just keeping and holding on to things that you know that you're never going to wind up donating. And that can really then clear the air when it comes to your home, your environment. It can clear your mind and help you really focus on what your priorities are, what is important to you, what does bring an increase in quality of life to you. Maybe that's something that you're realizing with this eclipse, is that possessions add much less quality of life to you than experiences do. And so maybe you are reprioritizing along those lines. This can also speak to kicking something off when it comes to your resources. And so some of the things that are our resources are our skills, are our talents. So this could speak to investing in those skills, talents, in long-term security. This could be traditional investing, like starting something along those lines, learning about that, developing your skills with investing, learning about money, learning about budgeting, learning about finance, and starting to take that really seriously. I mean, we're definitely in for some major financial shifts and changes in the coming years, but that doesn't mean at all that there's not opportunity. One of the things that's definitely going to wind up having to happen throughout all of that is there's way too much concentration of money right now. So that will have to be shaken loose here and there. And if we can figure out what's actually valuable, what's actually worth investing in, then some people can definitely win where maybe they haven't before in the coming several years, if they understand investing and are able to follow their own gut with that. But yeah, ultimately, really about refocusing on what's really important to you in terms of what it is that you value, what it is that you want to be prioritizing, and then getting the clutter, the extra stuff out of the way that gets in the way of that, whether that be spending money on things that don't improve quality of life, whether that be material clutter that you're holding on to because, yeah, you'd rather get rid of it in a better way, but you're not going to, just getting rid of the things that are kind of cluttering up that aspect of your life, your ability to prioritize and focus on what genuinely gives you a sense of quality and security in your life would be the best way to utilize this new moon eclipse here. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Leo. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Virgo, we have this new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your first house, and that speaks to you. It speaks to how you present yourself, how you see yourself, how you approach things. It speaks to your motivation, your sense of purpose. It also speaks to how you relate to other people. And so this is definitely pointing to a major personal transformation. I am thinking that I am right, that this is the only new moon eclipse that we're getting in Virgo in this whole set here. Because I know that next season, when we get close to Virgo sun season, that is going to be a Leo solar eclipse that's taking place there. So I'm pretty sure that this is the only solar eclipse that we're getting in Virgo. We did have a lunar eclipse here back in March. But really, all of this new moon eclipse energy is concentrated right around this period of time in your first house. So this is really jam-packed with a lot of potential for huge personal transformation, reinvention. So focusing right now on matters of what is important to you. What are your priorities? Who are you? Who do you want to be? How do you get there? How do you prioritize that? How do you make sure that that's what you're focused on going forward? I have a lot of Pisces in my chart, and we, Virgo and Pisces, have a tendency to put ourselves after in prioritization other people. And so this is probably going to be bringing that up a lot if you do tend to do that quite a bit. It's going to be telling you, really focus on yourself. This isn't about other people right now. That it's not selfish to take these periods of time where the astrology is saying, hey, this is all about you, and focusing during that period of time on you and what it is that you're really wanting out of your life, because this is your life to live. So, most directly, these first house transits will speak to matters of health, image, and self expression. So, reinventing along those lines. What feels really genuine, what feels really like organically best for you. If this is a matter of self confidence and how you carry yourself and so on, I would never say not to fake it till you make it. Now, we're trying to get to a point of feeling organically ourselves, of course. But if you have had a lot of weird inputs personally, if you've had a lot of experiences that have taught you maybe to play a bit small or something along these lines, or to have a kind of skewed image of yourself, again, to deprioritize yourself, things like this, then you may need to do that kind of, it's not even really faking it till you make it. It's more along the lines of reprogramming. And if you need to push yourself outside of a comfort zone in order to do that, this eclipse is definitely encouraging you to do so. If you want to reinvent your image, if you want to change something up that's quite drastic or significant, definitely don't worry about how are other people going to take that. This is about you and how you view yourself. And ultimately, that is getting you to being seen in a new light and living into this next version of yourself, this next phase of you living your life. That makes sense. So any sort of self-doubt, any sort of imposed limitations upon yourself, any sort of outdated sense of purpose, again, holding on to any connections that aren't feeling right anymore, shedding a lot of that. This is a new moon eclipse in your first house, but it's on the south node side, and the south node side speaks to release. It speaks to shedding. So there's a major shedding your old skin and living into this very new skin of yours. And one thing that we need to keep in mind is that skin tends to be very fragile. So do be aware you're likely to be quite sensitive throughout this time. So I wouldn't be subjecting yourself to things that tend to shake your confidence. If baby steps is what it takes throughout this time to really get you into a new kind of energy, then by all means. Ultimately, what this is about is, again, shedding that self-doubt, realigning with a sense of personal purpose that's going to carry you forward. Not who have I been, but who are you now and who do you want to be? And if those things aren't the same, which I think for most of us they're not, that is perfectly fine and wonderful. If you want to plot out how do I get from who I am right now to who I want to be, that is also absolutely wonderful to do. To really set those intentions on this is the new version of me. This is how the new version of me becomes the next version of me. But yeah, this is a really clean slate. So what is it that you stand for? What is it that's really important to you? What is your priority? Who are you right now? And who do you want to become? What is it that you want your life to be centered about? So yeah, this is very much your solar eclipse, Virgo. I hope that you really run with it, as it can do some really wonderful things, and it is definitely packing quite a punch. Being the only solar eclipse in Virgo, it's kind of a total trip to me. We're not getting any solar eclipses in Pisces, and I think we're only getting this one in Virgo, which is just very weird. It's so many lunar eclipses for all of us. We are getting another lunar eclipse here for you next season, so next March-ish. And we did have one for you last season. We're getting all sorts of lunar eclipses in Pisces, but we're just not getting the solar eclipses as much, which is kind of nice because it does speak to the fact that perhaps people with the heavy Virgo and heavy Pisces in the chart, it's not so much that we are like off track or anything like that. More so, I think it's that we've taken on a bit too much. And so this is really about releasing things, letting things go with the focus on the lunar eclipses. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. So I hope that this eclipse treats you wonderfully. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Libra, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your 12th house. And This house has to do with your subconscious, with matters of solitude, spirituality. This can also be areas of life over which we don't quite have direct control, where things just seem to come together on their own, serendipitously, synchronistically. So this can be pointing to a kickstart in subconscious healing. So any sort of conditioning or subconscious thought patterns or behavioral patterns or expectations, really looking at those from a fresh perspective and trying to wipe the slate clean. So, of course, that might not be just an overnight kind of an experience, but it is offering the ability to really kickstart that, to kick that off. Doing a lot of inner work, potentially even shadow work, being able to get a lot done on your internal self in this space of solitude. Now, you may also notice a lot of really significant dreams showing up. This is also the place of dreams and what goes on in the inner world. So this can also speak to imagination. You might be feeling quite inspired, or like there's this kind of muse that's coming through in this area as well when it comes to any sort of imaginative or creative works, something where you're working up material or you're working up some kind of form from your inner world and bringing that into being. Now, this is also a place where things can be hidden. So matters may come to light. You may see through someone in an interesting way that you don't usually, as to whether they're quite on your team or not. Get some insights on that, or even where you may self-sabotage at certain points. This can make that really quite clear, and again, offer an opportunity to change that, to shift that. So that may come through as a revelation externally, or it can speak to some kind of internal insight that you wind up just kind of coming into. Again, there's a lot of synchronicity that winds up taking place when we're dealing with 12th house transits. This can also really kickstart a spiritual practice, and that becoming an essential part of your day-to-day life. So feeling very spiritually connected, or recognizing that connection, having some more insight or understanding, a more complete awareness of your spiritual philosophy, but then also how spiritual practices can work for you. This could even speak to energy healing processes, which may or may not be specifically spiritual in nature, but anything to do with healing what's hidden, healing what is going on in the ether. So this can be through Reiki, this can be through yoga or breath work, psychology, etc. And this is also one of the places where our habits can show up. Now, these are usually internal habits, or habits that we don't really think about very much. It's more baked into what are your expectations of what your experience of something will be. So that kind of emotional baggage type of habits that can come through. Now, of course, we can have some really wonderful spiritual habits in this place as well, but these are usually the somewhat more ingrained types of habits. So that also coming to light and being able to be released, being able to be soothed or healed throughout this period of time. This house can also speak to matters of health, especially, again, things that are kind of invisible, things that are more along the lines of energetic. And I personally strongly believe that those things can have such a huge impact on our physical health as well. And the fact that Saturn is out there opposing it in the 6th house, if there's been an underlying health issue that's going on, this could also wind up bringing to light what is the underlying cause of that? What is the invisible aspect of this that's underpinning it? And additionally, now looking at that opposition with Saturn in the 6th, that is bringing in that notion of everyday habits and things like that. So this could even point out little ways that self-sabotage can come through and wind up screwing up your routine here and there, or making that more complicated for you. Unnecessary complications and things like this may wind up coming through. If that's the case, you know, we all do that to ourselves here and there. I mean, I've been doing it today. Today, at least there's a full moon eclipse that I can kind of blame this on, but I've just been having to push myself a little bit harder today, which is just unnecessarily overcomplicated, you know? So matters like that could absolutely be coming up for you as well to resolve in order to make that day-to-day life of yours, in order to make the aspects of life over which you do have a lot of control, to make those easier. So any sort of fears, any sort of self-doubt, things like that that can just kind of get in our way in silly kinds of ways. Like, for instance, when someone says something in a certain way and you're not sure what they mean by it, or you just have kind of a thought that is self-doubting and it kind of winds up derailing your day. Things like that may really present themselves in a way to be released, to be healed, basically, so that, again, that day-to-day routine of yours, what you do have control over, becomes a lot easier when we're not getting derailed in that. But yeah, as far as guidance on this, I would definitely recommend, regardless of what is kind of presenting itself, what aspects of that are presenting themselves, kicking off a kind of spiritual practice or an energy work practice, or making sure that you have time and space, physical space, in your life in order to be alone and to not be feeding your energy into others, especially as a Libra rising, having a tendency to do that. Really taking the time to disconnect and to recharge, I think, would be a really wonderful way to really utilize this new moon eclipse in your 12th house. Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I have for you, Libra. So I hope this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Scorpio, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your 11th house. And the 11th house speaks to social connections, friends, allies, benefactors, organizations, groups that you belong to or identify with. This can also speak to hopes, dreams, aspirations, and things along those lines. It's generally a very favorable, helpful house. And so this can definitely speak to connecting with new friendships or communities, getting involved maybe in some kind of an interest-oriented group or a community-oriented group, or a professional networking kind of colleague group or community. This could be an online group or something like that as well, but it's kicking off a greater sense of socialization or a sense of belonging to something. And this can be a very significant connection that you wind up then having with an eclipse showing up here. It's not just that you're putting yourself out there, it's that it's very much called for, and there's an indication here that there's some greater significance to reaching out around this period of time. And this may involve also, with the South Node is in Virgo, the South Node is in your 11th house, and that can speak to purging or detoxifying. So there may be an aspect of reaching back out to the world, especially if you've had some of these inauthentic social circles or inauthentic online spaces that I'm mentioning here that you've needed to release. We've already had a lunar eclipse in Virgo. So that may have been something that you've done recently, is just kind of reevaluating the connections that you do have and whether they're really good for you or whether they're really healthy for you. And with that release, you are making space for newer, more aligned groups and people to come through because you have more time for them. So this also winds up speaking to aspirations, goals, dreams, things like this. So this can also be a period of time, because we're getting the eclipses repeatedly up in this 11th house of yours, different types of shifts back and forth, this kind of ebb and flow in terms of your long-term goals or your role. Like I said, we had a lunar eclipse here several months ago. So there may have been something that you've been releasing recently. Again, things that mostly just kind of don't quite feel aligned anymore. Maybe even things that feel a bit draining, or that you're feeling like, I'm really just needing to put too much of my energy into this and it doesn't feel great. And that then freeing up space for an opportunity like this, where we have the solar eclipse in your 11th house, bringing something in, starting something new, identifying something that is really feeling aligned for you when it comes to hopes, dreams, aspirations, or the role that you're wanting to play socially. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be releasing and taking in something completely new. This could be a dream or a cause that you care about a lot that is ongoing, that's taking a new form. So this could be stepping into a leadership role or being recognized for the role that you play within a certain group or within a certain cause. You could be really called to be of service to others, or to, again, kind of play a role in a cause that's larger than yourself. And there probably being some kind of a purification or detoxification or health oriented, socially oriented, let's make things right, let's correct for certain things kind of aspect to whatever that dream or wish is or desire to be of service. So this could be church groups, charity groups. This could be a professional network. It doesn't have to be just of service, where you're playing a role where you're helping people or guiding people, leading people. This could even be, especially with the world being a little bit wonky right now, identifying an aspect of the things that are going awry in the world, because there's so many, right? Identifying one that you really feel like, this is something that I want to contribute to. This is something that I really want to play some part in correct. And recognizing the role that you can have in being something good in the world, contributing to the kind of world that you would like to see be created in the future. Yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So one thing I will just kind of throw out there is that there could be a connection that you're building around this time that will be quite beneficial to you. I mean, just looking at this, we do have that solar eclipse, the start of something new in Virgo, preferably something quite healthy, and Venus also in Virgo up there. You might overthink a connection like that, but the way that I'm seeing it, that looks pretty good. It looks pretty trustworthy. So I would lead with that, with trust first, when it comes to someone who seems to be treating you quite favorably. It looks to me like that's something that when I'm looking at this here, I would think this is probably pretty solid. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So I hope that this transit treats you super well. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Sagittarius, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your 10th house. And this is really speaking to a new role that you're playing in life that is quite significant to the direction of your life. So this could absolutely speak to a career breakthrough, or in terms of your public identity, your public role shifting and changing around this period of time in a way that is quite significant. So taking on a new role. Now, that may be in part also because you have released certain roles in recent months or in the past year or so. We did have a lunar eclipse in this place earlier in the year, and we do have the South Node in this place. So there is this kind of purging energy that's been there. But with the new moon eclipse taking place here, this is something that's starting off, that's kicking off around this period of time. There may even be some recognition of a new aspiration or a new ambition that you have around your role. This could be a position of leadership, recognition, new responsibilities that you're taking on that are going to contribute to the direction, basically, of your life unfolding in a way that feels a lot more aligned than perhaps it has recently. Now, this can also be kind of more abstract, where it's speaking to matters of meaning. So reassessing also that the meaning of success for you. So for instance, this doesn't just have to be, oh, you're getting a promotion and you're stepping into a new role in a specific company. This can also be a helpful redirection in terms of something that feels more aligned with what type of success really means something to you. So if that is a role that you are becoming aware of, which may be kind of adjacent, it may be in a different field, or it may be in a different type of or aspect of an industry that you're working in, that just feels more aligned with your sense of values, with your sense of purpose. So what about success is really significant to you? That opposition with Saturn, as I was saying in the general reading, there's something there about rejecting convention. So this may absolutely point to you creating a sense of unconventional definitions of success that really speak to you, and rejecting outmoded models that are kind of falling away, as it were, with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sky anyway. So those are kind of falling away in the world. I think we've seen that for sure, that the standard path that we're told to take has really lost a lot of its luster in certainly recent years, but also even in recent decades, as people realize, okay, this isn't really quite satisfying, and it's actually becoming a lot less rewarding, even. So, this can speak to you understanding a new way forward that really speaks to you and deciding to start in that direction now. This can also speak to a change in your relationship with authority. So again, what are the stories that have been told about your career trajectory or your life trajectory and what that should be? Who is it that has carried some sense of authority over you? And maybe you have followed those rules, maybe you haven't, and you've questioned whether you should or you shouldn't. Really, anything along these lines in terms of people defining things for you or making rules for you. Your relationship with that can really shift under this influence. So if you are stepping into a position of authority, you may be actively thinking through what that means to you and how you want to carry that, especially if you've had complicated experiences with authority figures yourself. You might feel a sense of, I want to do this differently. I don't want to present maybe as hard-nosed of a notion of authority as maybe you've witnessed or something along these lines. But ultimately, long-term seeds are really getting planted. So it's not necessarily the case that just during this Virgo solar eclipse, everything's going to wind up changing. But when you look back to this point, what was going on for you with regard to your notions of your ambitions and your role in life? What's happening around this period of time is fundamentally shifting the direction of that in a way that's much more aligned and much healthier for you. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Sagittarius. So I hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Capricorn, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your ninth house. And this house has a lot to do with travel or foreign themes. This can have to do with learning, especially higher learning, study, your philosophy and worldview. We can also see publishing in this place, as well as matters of spirituality, mentorship. So this can definitely speak to a new perspective, a new worldview. You may be finding that you are moving away from some of your old opinions on things and stepping into a new perspective on life. So this could be spurred on by some experience or some event, something that you are coming into contact with, maybe a foreign kind of perspective. This could be a course that you're taking. This can definitely speak to the start of learning something. So a new personal journey in understanding, in knowledge, in your philosophy. So maybe you're being introduced to something or you're just kind of being drawn in a specific direction. So this could even inspire you to take a trip or to plan to go somewhere kind of far away, somewhere unfamiliar that's going to push you outside of a comfort zone. And that's ultimately what the ninth house is really about, is getting you outside of what's familiar. So coming into a greater understanding of the world and your position within it and how you can grow within that. And this may be spiritualized in some sense, like a spiritual journey that is kicking off around this period of time. And that doesn't have to necessarily include travel. This can be an internal journey, pushing yourself to grow and to expand internally as well. And as this is pushing you to expand your worldview, you may be coming up against questions about truth, ethics, your philosophy, again, your opinions, and pushing them in a new direction, kicking off a new perspective on life. And this could even lead you into teaching about that or guiding people, encouraging others to expand as well. So doing that through teaching, through publishing, especially if it's new for you to really put yourself or your viewpoint, your perspective out there into the world. This is also a place of disseminating your views. And so that can be a journey that you are kicking off around this period of time as well, is putting yourself out there. And this may look like the actual dissemination phase, so actually publishing or putting videos out there on YouTube or something along these lines, but it can also speak to the start of that kind of a journey that's going to lead you in that direction. But yeah, ultimately, this is a pretty heady, cerebral, even academic kind of a place. So I would definitely recommend putting yourself in a position to learn about new things, putting yourself even if you're a guide or a teacher into a beginner's mind or a student kind of a framework where you're learning and pushing your knowledge and understanding as far as you can. Now, this can also be a place of legal matters. So that is something to think about. If there is a legal issue that's coming up for you, with you on either side of this, if this is something you're initiating or is coming to you around this period of time, it could be pretty significant. It doesn't look all that bad. It may actually be quite beneficial. But I would make sure that if that's the case, that you're really approaching it from a pure place, from a very honest and ethical place. And that should get you best results. Yeah, I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Capricorn. So I hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Aquarius, we have the new moon eclipse in Virgo taking place in your 8th house. And pardon that this is showing the moon in Libra. I would love to change this, but there was a weird Windows update, and now I have to get my screenshot tool to get fixed before I can actually take screenshots again. This lunar eclipse that I am recording this under has been quite a doozy. So I am also kind of like off in my energy today. I'm recording this on the 7th, which is when the eclipse is taking place. And it's been kind of a weird day, so bear with me. But that moon should be in Virgo here. And this being in your 8th house, this speaks to matters of quote unquote other people's resources. So that is quite a broad category. This can speak to financial agreements. This can speak to the psychological aspects of other people and how we can kind of get entwined with that. This can speak to matters of when we are dependent upon or other people are dependent upon us. And that can be materially, or it can be emotionally or spiritually. This can also speak to matters of security and assurance. And this is also a place of kind of esoteric topics as well as stigmatized topics. So when it comes to the material or financial aspects here, this could definitely speak to a loan or taxes, inheritances, investments, or joining your resources with other people, so partnerships as well, and not just romantic partnerships where our resources can wind up coming together, but also business partnerships, client partnerships, things like this. So where it is that you wind up intersecting with the resources of other people. So as I said, this can speak to kicking something like that off. If you are in discussion around business plans or things like that, this can definitely speak to something like that being quite significant. I would use a little bit of caution if you are considering starting a loan around this period of time. The main reason that I say that is that this eclipse is opposite to Saturn in your 2nd house. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it does indicate that that could become a bit cumbersome or burdensome to you, and something that you would want to renegotiate later, especially with that Saturn being in retrograde there. But this would be a really wonderful time if that's something that's on the horizon for you, to just kind of think that through and see if it really feels right. If it doesn't, you may want to reconsider maybe moving money around or looking at different ways that you're able to tap into other people's resources, so to speak. There could be movement on an inheritance if that's been something that's slow. There could be something that you're learning about taxes. You may even be really interested in learning about investments, learning about how to take your money and make more money from that. You may even get a tip. And again, I wouldn't just go all in and run with what's coming up around this period of time, but it's great to mull things over. But maybe you're hearing something. Maybe you are getting a tip on something that would maybe be a good investment. I would really dig into that. Virgo is not going to be too shy about really learning all of the nitty gritty before it makes a decision about something. Now, on the psychological aspect of this, to me, this can definitely put us into contact with the complications of other people's psyches or emotional states. And so this could kick off a rather in-depth connection that you may have with someone. This could also speak to recognizing your role as a counselor for other people. And you may find that around the time, probably a little bit closer, but around the time of this eclipse, that people are quite reliant upon you for assurance or for affirmation, things like this. Now, I would go with your gut on that as to whether or not that really feels right and feels good to affirm someone in their position. Speaking from personal experience, I've been in that position in a lot of different times, and I've definitely been a little bit too ingratiating to people at different points. So that may be something that's worth really thinking about as to if there's a way to better redirect someone's energy rather than to just try to make them feel better about where they're at. But this can also speak to a psychological rebirth of your own as well. So redefining those roles, those kinds of counselor type roles, redefining where you may be dependent upon others for assurance or affirmation yourself as well. Do you really root your sense of security and assurance in yourself? Or do you, when you're wondering about that, or when you're thinking about that, when those kinds of issues come up, do you tend to go and talk to other people? That can be perfectly wonderful to do so, but it might point to that there's a tendency to look outside of yourself for that sense of rootedness and security. And again, that can be perfectly wonderful, especially if there are trustworthy people around that you know are going to be really honest with you and supportive of you as well. But that can introduce interesting dynamics, like we can also sometimes get with the eighth house, where there can be a bit of a power imbalance there too, when we are rooting our sense of assuredness in other people. But yeah, ultimately, this is around releasing fears around trust or control through, again, to me, a deep rooting of that in yourself. I really feel like we're able to be a lot more open with other people, and we're able to be more vulnerable with other people when we know that regardless of how they respond to something along those lines, that we're good, that we're good kind of on our own. And it's the cherry on top to be able to be vulnerable with other people as well. So if there is a fear around trust or control, maybe looking at the root of that, looking at where that stems from in terms of perhaps prior experiences with other people. If that's a thing for you, then again, I would just reiterate, to me, it always winds up looking like the best way around that is rooting that trust, that security in yourself first. And there may be a matter of that coming up for release or for healing and starting fresh. This is also a place of research and digging into topics and matters and things like that. So esoteric matters, things that are kind of hidden, especially when it has to do with other people or topics that are outside of yourself. These tend to show up in the eighth house as well. So these can be matters that are stigmatized, that are highly spiritual in nature, that are esoteric in the spiritual sense of learning and studying about something, but then also really needing to have personal experience with it, like divination or things along those lines. But it can also be topics that are kind of hidden. So this can be a really investigative nature that's kicking off in you, trying to uncover secrets and perhaps other people's secrets and things like that. So you may be finding yourself going into some new rabbit holes that are really quite fascinating and wanting to get quite granular with understanding what's going on in the world, what's going on with different groups of people, what's going on with social power dynamics and things like this, what's not being said. But yeah, I think that is a lot of what I have for you, Aquarius. So I hope that this eclipse treats you super well. And thank you so much for spending this time with me. All right, so for Pisces, we have this Virgo new moon eclipse taking place in your 7th house of one-on-one relationships, partnerships, other people. Now, this moon should be on the Virgo side. I would go back and fix this and re-screenshot it and upload it and everything, but there was just a Windows update. I'm recording this like right during the lunar eclipse that's taking place on the 7th, and it's such a weird day. but there was a Windows like update that broke a lot of programs in my computer, which is kind of weird. And so my screenshot, my snipping tool is not working right now. Otherwise, I would totally not be, I'm not being lazy by not updating this screenshot. I just can't seem to do it until I, go under the hood with the computer and figure out how to fix those programs. But this new moon eclipse is definitely taking place in your seventh house. So most straightforwardly, this can speak to a new relationship or a relationship taking on a new phase. So a significant shift in your partnerships, or which partnerships you're recognizing really feel organically aligned and really feel like they are serving your growth going forward. These eclipses, they're always these weird little time loops that we wind up coming into, where we can recognize that something that we've been doing for a while just isn't really going to fit with us going forward. And so with the South Node in your seventh house, there may have been some purging already of certain connections if you feel like they're not aligned, or they could be taking on a new dynamic. There is a lot of thought there around you and what you're bringing to the table, what your priorities are. Again, what feels really aligned to you with this North Node in your first house. And then again, whether those connections that you have out in the seventh house are really serving you, are really aligned with that. So some connections are going to go forward with you. Some new connections are very likely to kick off throughout the coming year, especially, but significantly within about a 3-month window of the solar eclipse. So someone could be coming into your life. This could be committing more so to someone. So a relationship taking on a new form, a new way of approaching people, a new way of serving people, or expecting people to interact with you, basically. I will say, if there is a connection that seems somewhat significant that winds up kicking off around this period of time as well, that is pointed out by the eclipse. And so it's likely that that's going to be of greater significance, or it's going to be pointing to something that's going to be a pivot point for you. So there is long-term potential there, at the very least, in what that connection meant to you and the direction of, if not someone who's coming in for a while. Yeah, this is definitely speaking to healing imbalances in those one-on-one connections. So again, this more abstract meaning-making notion of who's aligned with you. What kinds of connections are you looking for at this point? What are your expectations? What are your standards? Do you have a tendency to overgive? I have a bunch of Pisces in my chart, so we do have a tendency to overgive. That may be something that's really getting pointed out here, as you are encouraged with that North Node in your first to really prioritize yourself throughout this broader period of time. And so there can definitely be something here as well about reaffirming boundaries. So valuing yourself at least as much as other people, a reminder around that, especially if you've been dealing with anyone who is a bit needy in maybe a genuine way. Maybe someone around you is going through something and you've really been offering a shoulder to them, or offering a lot of moral support, or any kind of support. This could be a little reminder, where are your boundaries? But also then values in your partnerships, not just in love and business, to me also one-on-one connection. So I do tend to see friendships also show up in the seventh house when they are really close. But what is it that means to you? What value does a partnership in this general sense, what does that have for you? What does that mean for you? What are your expectations? What are you trying to get out of partnerships? And I do mean that in a two-way street kind of a way. There is the value that we can derive from partnerships of being able to be of service to people and reaffirming our own sense of our value through what it is that we're able to provide for other people. But of course, that also then in the other way as well, of what kind of support are you looking for in your connections? What feels really comfortable? But yeah, other than that, I would say there are legal kinds of connotations to the seventh house, as well as commitments, agreements, contracts, things like that can also show up here. So you may be put in a position where you're starting off a new contract type of thing with someone. A tiny word of caveat or caution around that is this eclipse is opposite to Saturn in your first, so it could become a bit burdensome or a bit cumbersome. Keep that in mind when you're evaluating or analyzing whether that's something you want to get into or not. And yeah, other than that, just keeping in mind questions around self-sovereignty, authority, power in relationships, boundaries in relationships, and what partnership really means to you, what loyalty means to you. These kinds of big questions around your connections with other people are worth keeping an eye on around this period of time, as things can spontaneously present themselves to you as events or experiences under an eclipse, but also worth thinking that through, putting your mind on that. So yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. So I hope that this eclipse treats you super well, and thank you so much for spending this time with me.